It was the kind of dinner that should have ended with smiles, clinking glasses, and some half-hearted debate about who would do the dishes. For once, there was no shouting about politics, no rehashing of long-dead family grudges. Just steak, laughter, and enough red wine to keep everyone warm around the edges. I'd even caught myself thinking, maybe this is the turning point. Maybe this was the night when both sides of the family, hers and mine, would remember why we tried to blend them in the first place. Marla was seated beside me, wearing the navy blue dress I loved, the one she called her peacemaker dress. Her laugh was easy. Her hand occasionally brushed my arm. And as the conversation veered from work updates to vacation plans, I thought, stupidly, that we were still on the same page. I raised my glass. "I can't wait for our vacation," I said with a soft smile. It wasn't a grand toast, just a hopeful note in a night that felt surprisingly smooth. I saw the pause then. Just a flicker in her smile. Then came the laugh. Not a snort or a giggle, but a full-bodied, head-thrown-back kind of laugh. She looked right at me. "It's only for family, without you." I didn't get it at first. My brain didn't accept the words. I thought maybe she meant something else, or that I'd misheard her. But then the table erupted. Her mother nearly choked on her wine, howling like it was the best joke she'd ever heard. Jackson slapped the table, wheezing with laughter. Even Pierce, her smug younger brother, leaned back in his chair with the kind of grin that said, "We've been sitting on this one all week." My cheeks flushed, but not from the wine. I didn't laugh. I didn't ask for clarification. I just nodded, smiled thinly, and stood up. The sound of my chair sliding back was almost drowned by the laughter still echoing across the table. I caught Marla's eye, hoping for a hint of regret, some silent apology, even a glance that said she realized it had gone too far. Nothing. Her smile held. Her shoulders shook with the effort of holding in more laughter. I walked out before they could see me flinch. Before I could hear another chuckle from behind or a whispered, "He's always so sensitive." The front door closed behind me with a satisfying click. I didn't slam it. I didn't give them the satisfaction of a dramatic exit. But my footsteps down the driveway were heavy with something deeper than embarrassment, something colder. I got in the car and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel like it might hold me together. The engine hummed quietly, waiting. I stared out at the streetlights, blinking through the windshield like they were judging me too. A part of me wanted to go back inside, to demand an explanation, to make her say it was a joke gone wrong or some cruel attempt at humor. But I knew better. That joke wasn't spontaneous. It had been rehearsed, shared, anticipated. They were waiting for me to bring up the vacation. Waiting for that perfect opening. I drove home in silence. The kind of silence that doesn't just fill a car, it climbs into your chest and settles there. Every mile between the dinner table and my apartment felt like a small betrayal peeling itself back in layers. I thought about our vacation folder on my desktop, still filled with bookmarked beach rentals and saved flight alerts. I remembered the way Marla had pretended to care when I showed her those options last week, how she said, "We'll talk about it more later," with that distracted tone she used when she'd already made a decision. When I got home, I didn't pour a drink. I didn't even turn on the lights. I just sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the framed photo of us from 2 years ago at the beach, smiling like we'd tricked the world into thinking we were perfect. I looked at that photo and tried to remember what it felt like to believe in it. My phone buzzed. A message from Marla. It was a joke. "Don't be dramatic." That was it. No apology. No recognition that she'd humiliated me in front of both families. No acknowledgement that her words had been designed to sting, to isolate, to label me as the outsider I now realized I'd always been. I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled up our vacation folder. Deleted it. Every bookmark. Every flight plan. Every image of golden beaches and 2 glasses clinking beside a pool. Gone. I renamed the folder, not my vacation. Then I shut the laptop and finally turned on the lights, because if I was going to see the truth of where we were now, I might as well look it full in the face. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't cry, either. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the echo of laughter that wasn't mine. 5 days later, I was standing in line at the pharmacy, waiting to pick up a prescription I didn't even want to be on, when my phone buzzed. A fraud alert from my bank. I blinked down at the screen. $10,000 flagged for potential suspicious activity. 10,000. I felt my stomach drop into my shoes. I stepped out of line, heart pounding, and opened the banking app. The transaction wasn't fraud. It was Marla. I recognized the routing number she'd linked when we opened the joint account 3 years ago, the one I set up to make things easier. For groceries, bills, shared stuff, I'd said, foolishly believing that what was mine was also truly ours. The note she'd left on the transfer was short, almost laughable. Emergency family needs. Emergency. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so precisely on brand. Her version of emergency could mean anything from her mom needing new tires to her cousin needing bail money for some scam gone wrong. Or more likely, it was just another vacation fund labeled as something noble, hoping I'd be too trusting or too tired to notice. I didn't freeze. I didn't fumble. My fingers moved with the precision of someone who'd reached the end of their generosity. I hit the option to cancel the transaction. Then I locked the card. Then I renamed the account. I stared at the empty label box for a moment, then typed slowly, "Pay without me." That act, those 3 words, were the cleanest breath I'd taken in weeks. Not even an hour later, my phone lit up like a slot machine in a Vegas casino. Marla called. I didn't answer. She texted once, then twice, then 6 times in a row. She left voice notes, some pleading, some annoyed, some like I was the villain for protecting my own bank account. Her tone changed with each message, a chaotic slide from, "Baby, this is just a misunderstanding," to "You're being ridiculous," to "My family needs this. You always said you were part of the family." But I wasn't. Not anymore. That joke at the dinner table had peeled back every layer of the illusion. They'd laughed at me. Not with me. At me. And now, less than a week later, they wanted 10 grand? Her mother sent a message later that night. I raised Marla to believe in unity. "This behavior is beneath you." I stared at the text for a long moment before deleting it without replying. What did she mean? Beneath me? Beneath the guy who was apparently disposable enough to be laughed at in public, but reliable enough to bankroll their so-called emergencies? Then Jackson, always eager to show his teeth when someone was bleeding, texted me a meme, a laughing emoji, and a gif of someone throwing cash into a bonfire. "You sabotaging the family now," he wrote. I didn't dignify it with a response. Because at some point, silence becomes its own language. And mine was finally fluent. That night, I sat in my apartment with nothing but the hum of the fridge and the faint whir of the ceiling fan above me. I opened the ledger I used to keep track of our bills. Rows of rent payments, grocery expenses, gas, and little gifts I'd bought her just because. And every one of them had my name on the receipt. My card. My effort. I'd been the one stretching my paycheck like a magician just to make her life feel a little easier. And now she wanted to carve out a chunk of my savings with a note that read like a shrug. I couldn't remember the last time she asked me how I was doing, or if I was sleeping, or if I needed anything. I used to think love was about giving without keeping score. But that only works when both people are playing the same game. I wasn't in a relationship. I was in a con. And the worst part was, I signed up for it. Her last message came at 2:13 a.m. One sentence. "We'll talk tomorrow." I read it once, twice, then turned off my phone. Because the truth was, we wouldn't talk tomorrow. Not on her terms. Not with me apologizing for standing up for myself. I wasn't going to explain why I had a right to my own money. I wasn't going to beg to be let back into a circle that only wanted me when it was convenient. I wasn't going to justify boundaries like they were betrayal. I was done being the wallet with legs. The next morning, I transferred everything else out of that joint account. I opened a new one in my name only. Then I sat down with coffee, black, bitter, mine, and changed all my passwords. All of them. Bank accounts. Subscriptions. The Netflix account she still used under my profile named Sweetheart. I renamed it, removed. And as I sipped that coffee, watching the sun crawl through the blinds like it was peeking in on a man finally taking back his name, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Calm. Let them say I was being petty. Let them say I was sabotaging the family. If standing up for myself was sabotage, then so be it. I wasn't the villain. I was the escape route. The rain had started just after lunch, a soft drizzle at first, the kind that dots your shirt but dries before you reach the door. But by evening, it had grown bold, insistent, hammering against the windows of my apartment like it wanted to be let in. I was halfway through an episode of a show I wasn't really watching when the knock came. Firm. Familiar. I muted the TV and stood there for a second, letting silence confirm it. Another knock followed, 2 quick raps and a pause. I knew that rhythm. I didn't need to look through the peephole. Still, I did. Old habits. And there she was. Marla. Hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, no umbrella, soaked through at the shoulders. She was holding a red Tupperware container, like we were still playing house, like I was just going to let her in and pretend nothing had happened. Behind her stood Kaylee, arms crossed, expression neutral in the way people get when they're trying not to take sides but already have. And behind Kaylee, a little further back, but unmistakably present, was Derek, Marla's father, pretending to stretch his back as if he just happened to be out walking during a downpour, near my building, with his daughter and other daughter in tow. His eyes were sweeping across the porch like a home inspector, like he was still covering our rent. I opened the door, but didn't step aside. Marla smiled, lifting the Tupperware slightly, like it was a peace offering. "Soup," she said, like that word still meant comfort between us. I made too much. I blinked slowly. "You laughed at me in front of everyone," I said, voice low. "Then you tried to take my money." "It was a joke," she replied, like the phrase still held any weight, like it hadn't already been weaponized and emptied of its meaning. Kaylee didn't say anything. She just shifted her weight, the way someone does when they realize the wrong person is holding the power now. "We need to talk," Marla said, her voice softening like that would somehow reverse time. "I don't think we do," I said. She furrowed her brow, lips parting like she was about to launch into some speech she'd practiced in the car ride over. Derek cleared his throat behind her. Loud enough to be noticed, quiet enough to be deniable. "You're still part of the family," Marla tried again. "You always will be." And there it was. The line that might have worked once. Might have softened me, made me question myself, made me feel guilty for not opening the door wider. But not this time. I leaned against the doorframe. Calm. Measured. "That family laughed when you humiliated me. That family thought it was hilarious when you told me I wasn't going on the vacation I helped plan. That family tried to withdraw 10 grand from my account without asking. So no, I'm not part of that family." Marla's smile faltered. She looked down at the soup like it had betrayed her too. Kaylee's jaw tightened. "You're overreacting," Marla said, her voice dipping into that condescending calm she used whenever she was afraid she was losing control. "No," I said, "I'm finally reacting." Her eyes flashed then. She wasn't used to this version of me. The one who didn't try to patch the cracks. The one who didn't shrink to keep the peace. Derek took a half step forward, suddenly remembering he had a role to play. "Son," he started, and I cut him off with a raised hand. "I'm not your son. Not your problem. Not your sponsor." His mouth opened slightly, then closed again. He looked away. The rain kept falling, soaking through their coats, their pride. I could see it now, the expectation melting off their faces. They'd come here thinking the door would swing open like it always had. That I'd be grateful. That I'd apologize. That I'd remember my place in their carefully constructed orbit. But not tonight. I didn't invite them in. I didn't even step back. I just let them stand there in the doorway, waiting for a welcome that wasn't coming. "You've changed," Marla whispered, almost to herself. I smiled. "Good." Kaylee looked like she wanted to say something. Maybe she even believed it'd be the line that would fix everything. But she didn't speak. Because there was nothing left to say. Finally, Marla set the Tupperware on the ground. "In case you want it," she said. I looked down at the container, its lid fogging from the steam. "You should take it with you," I said. "You're going to need something warm tonight." She blinked hard, nodded once, and picked it back up. Kaylee turned without a word. Derek muttered something I didn't catch. And then they were gone. Back into the rain. Back into their world of practiced sincerity and manipulative kindness. I closed the door slowly. Locked it. Stood there for a second and listened to the silence. It didn't feel empty. It felt earned. I didn't touch my phone for the rest of the evening. It sat face down on the counter, next to the bowl I'd used for dinner and the unopened mail I kept pretending I'd sort eventually. I wasn't angry. Not in the loud, explosive way people expect after a betrayal. No. What I felt was sharper. Quieter. Like walking barefoot on broken glass. Every step forward proving I could keep going, but not without pain. They had shown up at my door like it was just another Thursday. Like soup could patch what they had broken. Like standing under the dripping awning of my life for 5 minutes entitled them to a clean slate. I'd held firm, and now the silence in my apartment wasn't empty, it was cleansing. But I needed a voice that would cut through everything else. Someone who didn't just sympathize, but understood. So I called Miranda. She answered on the first ring. "I saw Marla's post," she said before I could speak. That caught me off guard. "Already?" She tagged Kaylee. Kaylee tagged her brunch table. I have eyes everywhere. A small smile tugged at my lips, despite everything. That was Miranda, cold to the world, warm in the trenches. She'd been labeled difficult since high school because she refused to sit through sexist jokes, bad apologies, or holidays hosted by people who couldn't pronounce respect. Let me guess, she continued. Something about men being too sensitive and jokes gone wrong. I exhaled. Pretty much. She was quiet for a beat. You ready to stop letting them step on your spine? I nodded instinctively, then realized she couldn't see me. Yes. I'm not saying this to kick you while you're down, she added, her voice softening just slightly. But you should have called me 2 years ago. Maybe 3. I wasn't ready, I said truthfully. No, she replied. You were still hoping. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of years. Of birthdays where Marla's family outnumbered mine 10-1, and Miranda sat through it with a forced smile and knowing eyes. Of texts I never answered when she asked if I was okay. Of that one Christmas when she handed me a gift and whispered, I hope this reminds you who you are, and I laughed it off like everything was fine. I've got a plan, she said finally. Miranda, I'm not blowing up your life. I'm helping you find the fuse that someone else lit under your feet. I rubbed the bridge of my nose. I didn't think it would get this bad. That's what they count on. That you'll keep giving the benefit of the doubt until you're out of benefits. That you'll keep explaining yourself to people who never had to explain anything to you. I sat down on the couch and leaned forward, elbows on knees. They tried to take $10,000. They came to my house like I was the unreasonable one. Like they could just show up with broth and a smile and I'd let them back in. Because that's how it's always worked, she said bluntly. They play the tightrope act of mockery and dependence. Laugh at you, then lean on you. And you've taught them it works. That stung, but she was right. I'm not playing anymore, I said. Good, she said, her voice like flint striking stone. Then we start by documenting. Not for vengeance. For clarity. Because you need to see it all in one place, the transactions, the messages, the little digs they made you swallow and pretend were just how they are. You need your own record. Not just for them, but for yourself. She paused, then added, because when you start setting boundaries, they're going to act like you're the one who changed. They're going to call you cold, petty, ungrateful. They already have, I murmured. She let that hang for a moment. Then they're right about one thing. You have changed. You've stopped paying admission to a theater that only ever handed you the worst role. I leaned back against the couch and stared at the ceiling. I could feel it now, not rage, not heartbreak, but clarity. The kind that comes after a long storm, when the sky doesn't quite break into sunlight, but at least stops raining. I don't want revenge, I said. No, Miranda replied. You want your life back. I smiled. Yeah, that. Then let's take it. There was something final in her tone. Not cruel, not vindictive, just done. We spent the next 30 minutes outlining what she called a dignified detachment plan. No yelling matches. No performative Facebook posts. Just truth. Collected. Chronological. Clear. She told me where to look for the breadcrumbs I didn't even realize I'd saved, old receipts, shared logins, group text where her cousin Jackson made financial jokes at my expense. She reminded me of the time Marla bought herself a designer purse and told me it was for networking, and how I laughed like a fool because I wanted to believe it. We're going to start with a timeline, she said. Then we build a case, not for court, but for closure. Because when you finally walk away, you need to be sure you're not leaving anything behind worth keeping. That hit me in the chest. Not because I doubted the plan, but because, deep down, I already knew there wasn't anything left. Thanks, Miranda, I said quietly. I'm not doing this for thanks, she replied. I'm doing it because I love you, and I hate watching good people get trampled by pretty people with sharp teeth. We hung up, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight of the phone leave my hand and not return as regret. There was no fight, no dramatic confrontation, no screaming across parking lots or hallway standoffs with slam doors. Miranda had told me we wouldn't need any of that. Not when the truth was already sitting in my phone, waiting to be unearthed. So we started compiling. She created a shared drive and gave it a name that made me smile in spite of myself, Receipts and Resurrection. Inside it, we built folders, labeled by date, topic, transaction. Miranda was meticulous. We don't argue, she said. We show. Let them fight the facts. First came the photos. That Aruba trip from last year, the one Marla's family claimed was a gift from a friend after insisting they were barely getting by. I remembered Marla crying one night before that trip, saying we couldn't afford even a weekend getaway. Let's save for something real, she'd said. And I had nodded, canceled my birthday Airbnb, and told her we'd find time later. Meanwhile, I pulled up her Instagram post from Aruba. Nothing like family time under the sun. Miranda found the matching hotel receipt. Booked with our joint card. 5 nights. Oceanfront suite. Next came the Venmo trail. I'd never thought to look twice before. Little payments labeled family groceries, baby shower help, or emergency meds. But they weren't for what they claimed to be. One, labeled groceries, had a selfie attached. Marla in a booth, bottle service lined up in front of her, tags showing she was at a club in Miami. Another, labeled helping mom, was a payment to her cousin Jackson, followed by an Instagram story of him in Vegas with the caption, "And he's got me." Miranda screenshotted each one, paired the captions with transaction IDs, created a visual map of every lie. Then we pulled texts. I wasn't ready for what I saw there. One message from Marla to her friend Brooke read, "If he's dumb enough to marry in, he's dumb enough to pay up." It was dated just a week before our wedding. Another message said, "He doesn't even ask questions anymore. Just says yes." I should have made the joint account earlier. My throat tightened. It's strange how betrayal always feels fresh, even when it's old. I stared at the screen like it might apologize. Miranda didn't say anything at first. She just highlighted the message and saved it into a file called Pattern of Intent. When the folder was full, when every screenshot was labeled and timestamped and sorted like an exhibit in a quiet trial, I opened our family group chat. It was still active. That surprised me. After everything, they still hadn't kicked me out. Or maybe they hadn't noticed I'd gone silent. Marla had posted a few days ago something about a fundraiser for her cousin's tuition. A few hearts. A few "we love you" messages. I typed one line. Before you decide who's the villain, take a look at the unedited script. Then I uploaded everything. The screenshots dropped like bricks. 10, 20, then 40 files, each one labeled clean, undeniable. I didn't write a paragraph explaining. I didn't plead my case. I let the facts speak louder than I ever could. For 5 minutes, nothing happened. No typing bubbles. No reactions. Just silence. Then, slowly, the responses trickled in. "Aunt Carla, this isn't the place for this." "Uncle Marvin, keep the drama private." Kaylee left the chat. Literally exited. No comment. No defense. Jackson Sinna, and then, 5 minutes later, "Whatever, bro." I waited for Marla to respond. She didn't. Not right away. Instead, Miranda texted me privately. "Now they see. Now they choose." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the blue glow of the screen. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like airing out a house that had been filled with mold. Letting the rot breathe under light until it dried up and crumbled. Finally, Marla messaged. Not in the group, but privately. "You really want to do this?" That was all. No denial. No apology. Just a warning disguised as a question. I didn't respond, because she already had my answer. Later that night, I went back into the folder Miranda had created. I added one more file. A photo from our engagement night, Marla holding up the ring, smiling wide, my arm around her like I'd just won something I'd never thought I deserved. I renamed the file. He was enough. She just wanted more. Not for them. Not for public view. For me. Because I needed to remember that I hadn't failed. I hadn't been too soft or too giving or too naive. I had been enough. I just hadn't been what they could bleed dry without consequence anymore. I closed the folder, logged out of the shared drive, and turned off my phone. For the first time in months, maybe years, I slept through the night. I didn't expect applause. I didn't expect confessions or acknowledgments or even an ounce of guilt from them. What I did expect, what I prepared myself for, was the slow unraveling of a performance too long held together by rehearsed lines and selective memory. And that's exactly what happened. The next morning, the fallout started small. A few read receipts in the group chat. A few messages unavailable as people deleted things they'd said weeks ago. Then came the quiet accusations, not in the open, of course, but through indirect messages and careful blame casting behind digital corners. Marla's uncle sent me a message first. "This isn't the place for dirty laundry," he wrote, like my silence had been the only thing holding his world together. I didn't reply. Because when someone calls truth dirty, they're not asking for cleanliness. They're asking for your silence to continue enabling their comfort. Then her cousin messaged. The same one who'd slapped the table laughing when Marla made that family without you joke. "You're really going to burn everything over a couple of receipts," he wrote. "You were always a little too emotional, man. Grow up." I stared at his message for a full minute before blocking him. Not because I was angry, because I was done explaining myself to people who had never once tried to understand me. People who, for years, smiled with forks in their hands, carving pieces off my piece and calling it family tradition. Kaylee, though, surprised me. She didn't write to defend Marla. She didn't lash out or try to guilt-trip me. She just vanished. Radio silent. Left the family group chat, removed me as a contact, and disappeared like I'd never been part of her Sunday brunches or holiday card exchanges. That, I realized, was the most honest thing she'd done since this all began. But it was Marla who cracked first. She didn't come storming in with apologies or denials. She didn't text paragraphs defending her actions. No, she did something worse. She messaged my ex. Her name was Ray, someone I'd dated before Marla, before the house and the joint accounts and the carefully curated smiles. Ray and I had ended things on good terms. She lived in another city now, with a new job and a new partner. We hadn't spoken in over a year. So when she called me out of nowhere, I knew something had shifted. "I don't know what kind of mess you're in," she said, skipping any greeting, but Marla just met me. Sent me screenshots of our texts from, 3 years ago. Tried to say you were cheating back then. That I should speak now, before you ruin more lives. I blinked. She what? She's unraveling, Ray said plainly. You know that, right? This isn't damage control. This is sabotage. She's trying to make noise so people stop looking at the real mess. I exhaled slowly, letting the weight of that settle. Marla wasn't trying to clear her name. She was trying to stain mine. Throw enough smoke, and maybe people would forget where the fire had started. But I didn't panic. I didn't text Marla or demand she stop. I didn't beg her to leave Ray alone. I just let it unfold. Because when a mask cracks, you don't try to glue it back together. You let it fall. You let it shatter. You let people see what was underneath all along. And the more I stayed silent, the louder her desperation became. A few days later, she posted a photo on Instagram. Her, sitting on a couch that used to be ours, looking heartbroken. The caption read, "Sometimes the people you love most are the ones who twist the knife." She didn't tag me, but everyone knew. The comments were a mix of condolences and vague support from people who probably didn't even know what had happened. Stay strong. You deserve better. Men always find a way to ruin everything. And still, I said nothing. I wasn't trying to win anymore. I wasn't playing chess. I was just walking away while they screamed at an empty room. Miranda sent me a text that night. "Let the theater burn. You're not in the audience anymore." I smiled, because she was right. Later, I sat in my living room, alone, quiet, no buzz from group chats or background noise from someone else's TV shows playing in the next room. I looked around and realized something strange. Peace doesn't arrive with trumpets or fanfare. It slips in when the chaos exhausts itself. When the performance ends, and there's nothing left but your own breathing. That night, Marla messaged me one last time. Just a single line. Was I ever enough? I stared at it, surprised. Not because of the question itself, but because I could finally answer it without bitterness. I typed, "You were. But you wanted more than enough. You wanted control." And I didn't hit send. I deleted the message. Because the truth didn't belong to her anymore. It belonged to me. I closed the chat. Not because I hated her. Not even because I was angry anymore. But because I no longer needed to explain who I was to someone who had only ever loved the version of me she could use. It came in the form of a blandly worded email with a subject line that didn't raise alarm at first. Internal review notification. I clicked it while sipping my morning coffee, half expecting it to be some quarterly compliance update or administrative announcement. But the moment my eyes scanned the contents, the coffee turned bitter in my mouth. A formal complaint had been filed. Anonymous. Alleging emotional instability. Alleging unprofessional conduct stemming from a hostile home environment. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to read every word, line by line. The wording was vague, deliberately so. No names, no dates, just enough accusation to plant a seed of doubt in the right person's mind. The kind of poison that doesn't kill, just lingers long enough to rot the root of your reputation. I sat back, staring at the screen. This wasn't just a coincidence. I'd been with the university for 7 years, teaching literature and creative writing to students who came back semester after semester. I'd built a reputation for being dependable, thoughtful, even boring, if I'm honest. My evaluations were solid. My office hours were always filled. I had no enemies at work. Except now, I apparently had one at home. Or someone who used to be in it. I checked the complaint again. There was a line tucked halfway down the email, a throwaway sentence that hit like a hammer. Additionally, it has been suggested that students have felt discomfort due to residual tension from the instructor's personal life. My students. They dragged my students into this. I sat in silence, staring at the wall across from me. Pale gray. Smooth. I'd chosen that paint myself last summer, trying to give the apartment a cleaner, lighter feel. Now, it felt like it was closing in. 1,000 thoughts ran through my head. Who would believe it? How much of my file would be flagged? How would this affect next semester's contract? I knew universities well enough to understand that these kinds of complaints, even without proof, left fingerprints that never quite disappeared. And I knew who had filed it. Marla, or someone close enough to her to speak her language. There were no specifics, no evidence, but the tone? The insinuation? It had her fingerprints all over it. She wasn't trying to prove I was a bad partner. She was trying to prove I was unstable, dangerous, unfit. And she was doing it without ever having to show her face. That night, I called Miranda. I didn't say hello. I didn't ease into it. They're trying to destroy me, I said, my voice flat. She didn't ask who. She didn't ask what. She just said, then burn the bridge. You're not going back anyway. Her confidence was a lifeline. You sure it's her? She asked after I walked her through the email. Positive, I said. There's no other explanation. Then we don't panic, she said. We prepare. We push back. She wants you scrambling. Don't give her the show. I exhaled slowly. It's just, I've worked so hard. This job, it's the one thing she never touched. Never poisoned. I kept it separate. She's counting on that, Miranda replied. She knows what it means to you. That's why she's going after it now. You're not at the dinner table anymore. You're not a wallet. So now she wants your name. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, one hand tangled in my hair. I don't want this to become a war. Then call it what it is, she said. A defense. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant car horn, every vibration of my phone felt like a reminder that the battleground had shifted. This wasn't just about emotional wounds anymore. It was about character, reputation, my livelihood. I sat at my desk and stared at the screen again. I reread the complaint, my eyes tracing the words like they might rearrange themselves into something forgivable. They didn't. But somewhere between the lines, I saw the desperation. This wasn't strength. This wasn't power. This was someone losing control of the narrative and scrambling to rewrite it before the ending arrived. She thought I'd crumble. She didn't realize I'd already stood back up. At 2 a.m., I opened a document and began to write. A timeline of every incident, every dig, every financial manipulation. I documented how I'd handled our separation, how I froze the account legally, how I'd avoided contact. I pulled my student evaluations from the past 6 semesters and compiled them into a PDF. I emailed myself copies, created backups, set appointments with HR. If they wanted professionalism, I'd show them professionalism in its clearest, quietest form. Because while Marla was still performing for an audience, I was documenting the truth. I turned off the lights and stood by the window, looking down at the street below. Empty. Silent. Rain from earlier still glistened on the pavement, catching light from the street lamp like it was holding on to the day's last reflections. I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. They could throw shadows all they wanted. I had light now, and I knew exactly where to shine it. The next morning began with resolve, not rage. There was no angry pacing, no revenge fantasy. Just a quiet clarity that settled over me like armor as I dressed, brewed my coffee, and called Miranda. She thinks she's untouchable, I said. She's not, Miranda replied. And I know just the person to remind her. Enter Raina, Miranda's college friend turned lawyer. I remembered her vaguely from a dinner years ago, quiet, polite, but with eyes that missed nothing. The kind of woman who could take your confession, lace it with law, and wrap it in paper heavy enough to make a boardroom tremble. Miranda made the connection that afternoon. Raina didn't ask for drama or storylines. She asked for details. Dates, documents, patterns. So I handed her everything. The email from my employer, the complaint's wording, my student evaluations, the sudden uptick in financial sabotage followed by character sabotage. The screenshots Marla hoped no one would ever see again. I gave Raina the full script. She turned it into a legal playbook. By the next morning, she had traced the complaint's digital footprint to an IP address. Marla's workplace. She didn't file it from home. She filed it from her office. Using company equipment. That was the mistake. Her arrogance had been her tell. Raina sent one letter, just one, to Marla's HR department. It wasn't dramatic or emotional. It was surgical. A breakdown of the false complaint, the conflict of interest, and the potential liability of allowing employees to weaponize workplace resources for personal attacks. There was no direct threat, just accountability wrapped in law. The complaint against me? Dropped. Without comment. Without apology. As quietly as it had appeared. Marla didn't text me after that. Not right away. But I didn't wait for her next move. I made mine. I sat down with my laptop and a checklist. It was time to close every gate she still had a key to. First, bank accounts. I logged in and double-checked every old shared access. The joint account was already frozen, but I went further. New accounts. New routing numbers. I contacted my payroll department and rerouted direct deposits. Even changed the PIN to my emergency savings card. Second, credit cards. She still had access to the backup card I'd given her during our first year of marriage, forgotten in a drawer until now. I canceled it. Issued a new card in my name alone. Third, leases. Our old apartment lease was still technically shared, though she hadn't lived here in months. I had tried to be civil, tried to give her time. No more. I sent a formal notice through my property manager. She had 30 days to remove her name. After that, legal proceedings. Miranda watched me go through each step like she was watching a friend finally tie his own shoes after years of limping barefoot. You don't have to scorch the earth, she said, but you do need to claim your side of the land. So I did. And when Marla finally texted, it wasn't what I expected. Why are you doing this? I thought we agreed to keep things clean. No apology. No recognition of what she'd done. Just confusion that her usual tactics didn't work. I stared at the message, rereading it as if it might reveal something new. But it was the same threadbare song. Her version of clean, meant silent compliance. It meant letting her take what she wanted while smiling through the wreckage. So I replied, I'm keeping it clean. I just stopped letting you sweep everything under my name. She didn't respond. The next day, I sent the lease termination notice through email. It was concise, professional, final. Then I packed the last of the things she'd left behind. A hoodie, 2 chargers, and a photo album she probably forgot she ever started. I boxed it up, labeled it with her name, and dropped it at her sister's porch. Kaylee didn't come out. I didn't wait. By the end of the week, I had done what I never thought I'd do. I untangled my life from hers completely. Every account, every shared tie, every digital trace of connection that allowed her to hold a thread of power over me was gone. I didn't do it in anger. I did it with precision. Because I learned something, I didn't have to raise my voice. I could raise the stakes instead. And when the dust settled, I stood taller, not bitter, but firm. Not cold, but clear. People kept waiting for me to crack. To post some dramatic meltdown online. To spiral. But that's the thing about someone who's been silent for too long. They don't break. They become intentional. Marla and her family had underestimated the quiet one. But now the quiet one had documentation, boundaries, and Raina. I sat on my balcony that evening, watching the sky shift from gray to gold. A neighbor's wind chimes rattled softly in the breeze, delicate but persistent. I sipped a drink. Nothing fancy, just something chilled and simple, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. Not over other people. Not over perception. But over myself. Over what I allowed. Over what I kept. Over what I'd never let happen again. And that was louder than any revenge. I didn't plan the post. It wasn't a grand strategy or some long-awaited mic drop. It came to me quietly, like the final period at the end of a sentence that's been writing itself for far too long. I was standing in my kitchen, pouring the last cup of coffee from the pot I'd made that morning. My phone lit up on the counter. A tag. A notification. Then another. And another. I picked it up, already knowing. Marla had posted. A carousel of photos. Her smiling at brunch, holding her niece, standing with her coworkers at some charity event she probably donated to with the money she tried to steal. The caption read, still standing. Still smiling. Some people try to break you, but the real ones know the truth. The comments were exactly what you'd expect. You're so strong. Keep rising above the hate. Let the bitter ones fall behind. Every heart emoji felt like a nail in a coffin, hers or mine. I couldn't tell yet. I sat with that post for a while. I didn't like it. I didn't report it. I didn't text Miranda or Raina or any of the few people who'd stood beside me these past few months. I just read it, then reread it, until the last line didn't sting anymore. And then I opened my own page. No filters. No edits. No story or thread or clever retort. Just a single sentence. Sometimes the worst part of betrayal isn't what they did. It's how many people watched it happen and stayed silent. I posted it without tagging a soul. No names. No details. Just truth. My truth. The silence was immediate and deafening. No hearts from the usual crowd. No messages from her side of the family, her brunch clique, or her cousin who once called me the glue of the room. No surprise. I didn't post it for them. I posted it for me. And then, slowly, the messages trickled in. Not the ones I expected. Not the loud defenders or the performative sympathizers. But the quiet ones. People I hadn't heard from in months. Old colleagues. Former students. Distant relatives who'd always hovered at the edge of family photos. One wrote, "I always wondered why you disappeared from the group. I saw how they treated you. I'm sorry I didn't speak up." Another, "I saw the screenshots. I stayed quiet because I didn't want to get involved. But I should have. You didn't deserve that." There were a few apologies. A few quiet acknowledgments. Most people didn't say anything at all. And for the first time, I didn't care. Because I wasn't looking for justice anymore. I was looking for peace. Miranda messaged me an hour later. No greeting. Just, "That was your cleanest strike yet." No blood, but everyone's feeling the bruise. I replied with a simple, "It was time." That evening, I checked Marla's page again, not out of obsession, just curiosity. She hadn't responded, but her post was gone. Deleted. She didn't post anything else for 2 days. That said more than any response ever could. I walked through my apartment that night, switching off lights, tidying up small messes that hadn't bothered me before. Something about cleaning a space after letting go of emotional weight made it feel more mine. I lit a candle on the coffee table, something fresh and sharp, eucalyptus and mint, and sat on the couch, watching the flame dance. I thought about all the ways people had told me to move on these past months. Like it was a switch. Like closure was something you could order with express shipping and be done within 2 business days. But I was learning that closure wasn't an ending. It was a reclamation. A moment when you stopped bleeding from the same wound and started building something sturdier in its place. I remembered how many times I'd kept my mouth shut. How often I'd let myself be the punchline to avoid being the problem. How many dinners I'd endured where family meant swallowing disrespect in the name of tradition. And I realized I had never really been quiet. I'd just never been heard. Until now. Now, my silence wasn't submission. It was choice. It was control. It was presence. I slept better that night than I had in years. No dreams of confrontation. No shadows of past arguments. Just deep, undisturbed rest in a home that finally felt like mine again, not just legally, but emotionally, spiritually. The next morning, I woke up to one last message. Not from Marla. From someone I hadn't thought about in months. Pierce. Her brother. It was short. 3 words. "You were right." I stared at the screen. Thought about all the times he'd laughed in my face, joined the mockery, acted like my discomfort was the entertainment portion of the evening. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't appreciate it, but because I didn't need it anymore. Validation from the wrong crowd is just another leash. And I was already walking free. I turned off my phone, stepped onto my balcony. The morning air was crisp, the sun just beginning to rise over the skyline. A new day. Mine. The door clicked shut behind me with the kind of finality you don't hear often in life. Not metaphorical, not dramatic, just a quiet, solid latch that sounded like a chapter closing. I stood in the hallway of my new apartment, box in hand, heart steady. No whirlwind of emotions. No second guessing. Just air that felt easier to breathe. It was small. Smaller than the condo Marla and I had once shared. Smaller than even my first post-grad rental. But it was mine. No one else's taste in furniture. No framed pictures of people who never truly liked me. No scented candles I'd been told to like. Every square inch was neutral and honest and unclaimed. The leasing office had handed me the keys earlier that morning. A crisp envelope with a little card inside that read, "Welcome home." I almost laughed when I read it. Not because it was cheesy, but because it was the first time in a long time that those 2 words actually meant something. As I began unpacking the essentials, kitchen basics, chargers, the box of books that had followed me through every move, I noticed something taped to the outside of the door. At first, I thought it was junk mail. But when I peeled it off and turned it over, I froze. It was a drawing, crayon on construction paper. A stick figure standing in front of a square-shaped house, arms up like a victory pose. Above it, written in uneven letters, were the words, "Welcome, Mr. Miles." A tiny heart floated over the house. My new neighbor's kid, I guessed. I'd heard her voice earlier through the wall, singing, laughing, the squeal of cartoons. I stood there holding the drawing longer than I meant to. There was something about it that made my throat tighten. Maybe it was the purity. Maybe it was the fact that someone saw me as a person worth welcoming, not a resource to be used or a target to be teased. I framed it, right then and there. Found a cheap black frame in the last box and hung it on the kitchen wall next to the light switch. It was the first piece of art in my new place. And it meant more than all the expensive canvas prints Marla used to buy from catalogs just to match her Pinterest boards. A few hours later, I turned off my phone. Marla had messaged again. "You've changed," she said. I didn't even need to read the rest. Yes, I had. She meant it like an insult. Like I'd become someone bitter, someone hardened. But to me, it was the best compliment she could have given. Because change wasn't a fall, it was a rise. I had changed. I was no longer someone who mistook loyalty for love. No longer someone who let being the quiet guy turn into being the punching bag. I'd learned that silence doesn't always equal peace. Sometimes it's just the echo of your own self-abandonment. No more. I spent the afternoon building my bookshelf. My hands moving without rush, without the tension of needing to make something perfect for someone else's approval. I placed the books by instinct, not color coordination. There was no one to judge it. Just me. I even took a walk. There was a park nearby. Nothing huge, just a small green stretch with a bench and a walking path. I sat down with a coffee and watched the people pass by. A woman jogged by with a dog that looked like it ruled her household. A man helped his daughter climb a tree. The world kept turning. And not one single part of it needed my pain to fuel it. That was a strange kind of peace. There had been a time, just weeks ago, when I didn't think I'd get here. When every hour was a tug-of-war between who I used to be and who I was becoming. When it felt like speaking up would unravel everything I'd spent years building. But the truth was, what I'd built hadn't been a home. It had been a cage. Comfortable, sure. Familiar. But a cage nonetheless. And this little apartment, this crooked bookshelf, this crayon drawing on the wall, this was freedom. I didn't need validation from Marla's family anymore. I didn't need her mother's approval, her cousin's jokes, or her father's passive-aggressive advice. I didn't need to be part of their vacations, their fundraisers, their matching sweaters for Christmas photos. I didn't need any of it. Because I had something better now, a sense of myself, unfiltered and unburdened. Later that night, I stood by my window, looking out over the neighborhood. The lights in the building across from mine flickered on and off as people settled into their routines. The world looked the same, but I wasn't the same inside it. I was done explaining. Done defending. Done shrinking. Marla had texted once more before I powered down for the night. "I hope you're happy now." And I was. Not the kind of happy that comes with smiles and parties and photo ops. The kind that settles quietly in your chest and says, "You made it out. You're safe now." I climbed into bed. My bed, fresh sheets, soft light from the lamp I'd chosen, the hum of the world outside muted by the insulation of peace. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to be anyone but myself. Not a wallet. Not a background character. Not an easy target. Just me. And that was finally, gloriously, enough.